Good morning, everybody. I wanted to thank you for making time in your busy schedules to join us today on this Vivid webinar. We know that your time is of importance, so we're going to cover as much of this material as we can in the next hour. Today's topic is going to be the new changes and the updates to the UFT version 12.52. Next slide. This webinar is brought to you in conjunction by the Vivid organization and HPE, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, which is, for those of you that are familiar, the new brand for the products line at HPE. Next. Again, good morning. My name is Robert Linton, and I am a manager here at Cortex. Cortex has been a partner with HP and Vivid for many years now. We've attended many of the Discover conferences and other SIG events around the country and around the world. I belong to the TQA SIG, and it's my honor to help today by hosting this important webinar that's going to cover the changes that are coming in version 12.52 of UFT. Next slide. We're honored today to have one of HPE's. It's going to take me a little time getting used to saying HPE because I've been saying HP for so many years. But we're honored to have Roe Weisbert with us today, who is one of the R&D product managers for the HPE UFT product, and his expertise and his presentation will enlighten us on some of the new features and capabilities that are coming with the 12.52 version of UFT. Next slide. So before we get started with this webinar, I'd like to cover a couple of the housekeeping topics. So everybody that's on this call, and there's many of you that are joining us today, and we thank you. The recording is the session is being recorded. It is a live recording, and this session will be available on the Vivid website a day or two after today's session. During the presentation, if you have any questions that you'd like to be addressed at the end of the presentation, you can type that into the panel, the questions pane on the panel that's on the right side of your screen. You just type those questions in, and then we'll prioritize them and try to address as many of them as we can at the end of the webinar. So next. For those of you that aren't familiar with the control panel, this is a view of what you see normally on the right side of your screen. Here we're showing you that if you expand the questions/chat box in that control panel, that's where you'd be able to type in your questions, and if it's something that can be answered by one of the organizers or panelists during the presentation, they'll answer it. Otherwise, we're going to assemble all those questions and try to address as many of them as we can at the end of today's webinar. So be patient, and we'll get to as many of those questions as we can, time permitting, at the end of the webinar. So let's move on so we can get started with the webinar and address this interesting topic of UFT 12.52. Next.
Okay, guys. Good morning. This is Roe Weisbert. Before we move and dive into presenting the newly introduced content of Unified Functional Testing 12.52, I would like to get everybody on the same page. I know that we have here on the line people from different backgrounds. For now, I will just make a very, very short sync just to see that everybody is on the same page. For that, I have my good old friend MS Paint just to dictate the main players of the story called UFT. So UFT, in a nutshell, is an IDE that is based on VBScript language. It's integrated with ALM. We won't get into the scope of ALM or application lifecycle management, just for you to know that all the tests that are being handled inside UFT could be saved executed and totally managed by ALM. For now, we are looking at a tool that helps you create regression testing and automated regression testing. So from that perspective, we always refer to this F word as the functional. So this is unified functional testing. For now, what is important just to understand that UFT stands as a unified tool that enables the creation of functional testing, like black box testing, on items that might be UIs that are based upon textual properties that are being created here, and actually uniquely identify each one of the widgets or even the complete application under test frame in order for operations to be made upon. Those could be anywhere between simple clicks and more thorough validations on the actual state of those applications. Another item that also is being concentrated here under the unified. It means that unified functional testing actually represent a unification of what was known formerly to people as QTP, Quick Test Professional. This represents the GUI test, or actually tests that are being made here on any UI that you might think can emulate the user interaction, or API test, for what was known formerly as service test, which means that if you have some kind of a service somewhere running and you'd like to verify the expected versus actual behavior of the responses that you get based on different protocols, this is also the case. The third thing that I will represent during this slides will be BPT. For now, we will just treat this one as a supplement, and I will go back to that later when I represent the content of BPT specifically. Up until now, that was just the concept of UFT in a nutshell. Excuse me. So let's see what are actually the items that we have for UFT in general. So as I mentioned, the application under test might be something on your desktop, as well as it can be a web application. For that, UFT enables a seamless cross-browser testing, which means that if you have the capability to automate different applications that are based on any widget that you can think of, UFT actually gives you the a large array of supported technologies, as from the good old Delphi test, terminal emulators and so on, and until newly introduced toolkits. We'll go over the web service testing and the mobile test as well, and BPT as I mentioned, but the most important thing for now to understand is where does this whole picture fit in. So when we try to sketch the automation needs that we have, it basically turns to two directions. One might be non-technical users, which are business analysts, subject matter experts, even testers that know their way around business processes of their tested applications. In the middle section, you'll have the test automation engineer. Most likely, that those people will be the ones that methodologically are using GUI test, are using UFT or what was known as QTP as simple VB script automation. The right side of the screen represents the capability of what I mentioned earlier as BPT, business process testing, to well articulate a business process for someone who is well acquainted with it, although he doesn't necessarily have the the automation engineer qualification or even the technical knowledge, but that's not a gap. So in business process testing, that would be the part where we will present in the next slides to come. How does this unification of those personas under the same IDE called UFT serves both non-technical as well as highly technical? On the left side of the screen, you might see a persona who is better described as a dev tester. Those people are usually referred to as developers that actually work in QA. They are a highly seasoned automation engineer that made a step and actually took the next level with adjusting it in the usage of market-leading IDEs such as Visual Studio or Eclipse for C# and Java, respectively. So the LeanFT integration is also something that you should be aware of, because that is the complete view, the complete spectrum that we see here on the screen. And for now, we will deal only with the UFT, which is the IDE itself, and business process testing, who is in a way a framework that is being built upon the existing capabilities of the strong automation engine that UFT just brings along with him. So we can enumerate some of the major parts that we articulated before just as mere icons. So in cross-browser testing, as from version 12.50, we have the data driving, which is the browser type parameterization. Essentially, it means that if someone wishes to have the same script running easily and smoothly on different browsers, even something which is, let's say, Safari on a Mac machine, it's totally possible. And the sheer difference between the creation of those assets is just enumerating those different keywords that represent different browsers. That's all. It's just something that looks like an Excel sheet, for that matter. We can better clarify that in the demos that we will show later on this slide deck, and you'll also be able to see how easy it is to parameterize things. Firefox JavaScript extension is also something that was introduced in 12.50, which is a renewal of the capabilities to manipulate the objects of the Firefox browser through automation with a newly introduced agent who is much faster. Edge support, for those of you who had the chance to play around a little bit with this new browser, is only on tech preview for the 12.52, but it's something that we are aiming towards next releases to be part of the seamless cross-browser testing for the automated capabilities of UFT. As for mobile, there is the capability of UFT to integrate seamlessly with another product of HPE called MC, or Mobile Center. Mobile Center, in a nutshell, enables you to create tests on real devices, to enumerate those between different applications that might reside or not and should be installed on a particular device. And UFT takes advantage of this great capability that the MC Lab just gives for free, which means that in any kind of a situation that you might find yourself starting an automated testing or even creating a test on a web application that might or might not, but it can be even on your own desktop or with your Chrome browser, you might be able to sometime decide that you like it to run, let's say, on Dolphin browser on your Nexus 7, for example. So that is a very big thing going on with the mobile testing, which means that not only that you can develop and test your native mobile apps, but also hybrid apps. And for now, as you can see, the pure web apps are in tech preview, and as well, those are being aimed to be a strong supplement and to be fully supported in the next releases to come. As for the flexible consumption, there is a way that UFT could run without this big IDE that is already being used for creating tests. Let's say that you've already created your test and you're fully aware that everything is okay and you just want to run it. So you can run those on different stations with different item that gives you a licensing just to run those headless. And your applications could run on different stations in a much cheaper way. Having said that, we should also mention that the Autopass license server is changed, which means that for those of you who are well acquainted with the old QDP or even UFT prior to the 1250 version, it had a licensing mechanism called Sentinel. Essentially, we just made it a complete brand new license server validations and keys that our support is fully equipped with the capability to give people who are using the old valid licenses that they have with the new Autopass license valid servers, whether it's concurrent, or like on a server base, or even seat licenses. In the usability part, we took much emphasis on, first and foremost, listening to our customers. A lot of times people would say, you know, there is a very, very big and well articulated report, but what about lightweight? What about if we just need to send this report zipped to somebody by email, and we don't want it to be that big, or even just give us this opportunity to have it in a much slimmer way. So this is exactly why the HTML-based report is came to existence and is now serving proudly in the 1250 version, so that people now can actually save their reports, but also consuming them, or even send those by emails, so that those are pretty much slimmer than the ones that we used to know in the past. Having said that, that also gives a good supplement to the existing overall IDE new look and feel that we provided, which actually cleared a little bit the view. And I will also present it when we get to BPT, for example, business process testing, where we changed things in a way that we even filtered out things that simply are less relevant for people who are business analysts or subject matter experts that need to have a very, very quick kickstart that should start their automation fast. So just before we move on, we have also the part that represents the integrations. So this is not news. We have a lot of integrations and technologies in UFT, whether it's for SAP, of course, ALM, and BPT that was once an ALM almost proprietary feature that was brought in inside UFT IDE. So actually, now when people are using UFT, they can settle for that instead of just going to ALM, doing things there, and to change things or even create assets or parameterize those. For now, everything, practically speaking, can be done inside UFT. So regarding the cross-browser testing, as I mentioned, the Firefox was a new extension that was introduced. The overall uniformity across browser types is something which is an ever-growing need. To simply have one script that we can data drive it if we want, but nevertheless that the capabilities themselves should be seamless and to be run across different browsers, even if it's on my desktop or even if it's on a remote machine like a Safari, and even if it's just on one mobile device such as an iOS or Android-based device. So this is the experience that we strive to refine. As for usability, as I mentioned, the new look and feel of UFT gives the users, first and foremost, a glimpse on news feeds. What is new with 1250? You can see the recent tests and the whole notion of inner dialogues wasn't changed that dramatically, but rather simplified. In this snapshot, you can see a snapshot of the report. The HTML report that you can actually see rendered in this tabs canvas is nothing more than an HTML file, which could be consumed even from your own browser. It is stored in ALM like any other results that was once in UFT, and for backward compatibility, if someone wishes to go back and have their own RRV view, it's still possible. So nothing actually is broken but enhanced. I always say that we do not invent the wheel, but simply make it go faster. The new keyword view is something that is mostly representing the initiative that we have also for non-technical personas. Basically, what it means is that we enhanced a great deal of the capabilities of the keyword view of UFT that is also being used for BPT. Having said that, it means that anybody with an ordered object repository that represents some application under test can actually construct the items and the operations that should take place on the application, pretty much like constructing a keyword. As you can see in the rightmost side of this snapshot, there is the documentation that actually allows people just to have a look on what is the human language kind of the operations that took place. And we should also notice that HPE has also other solutions such as the HPE Sprinter that allows people who are manual testers to bridge the gap and actually automate their manual testing and to create a better step between the manual and automated world. This documentation that you see on the screen, on the right side of the screen, could effectively be used even in automated components just to construct those. So those could be empty shells just with steps that refer to the operations that should be done should a user would like to do that manually. So the integration is quite tight. Although it is not an HP Mobile Center session, we should mention just in a word or two what it means. So first and foremost, it means that any skill set that a UFT automation engineer has, it could be leveraged by using Mobile Center because there is no learning curve. The test object model is the same test object model. Some of the operations and properties were added, but we're actually dealing with the same thing. So if you are running your tests or need to construct tests on native, hybrid, or even web, purely web, you can do that rather easily. So with respect to integration with source control systems, we have three options. One is Git, SVN, and of course Bamboo. Those three are pretty much covering almost 80% of the entire market preference for source control systems, and each one of the assets that you might create or handle might as well be pushed, committed, and reverted with the good old behavior of Git, SVN, or Bamboo. So if we want to articulate specifically what are the 1252 highlighted features, those will be the ones. So we have four pillars here. One is the technologies, and much emphasis was given to UI automation. UI automation is an Microsoft API for automation. In a way, we embedded it as a recording mode, as a test object with its own test object model that strictly aligns to the conventions of the GUI test, which means that somebody can even switch between those two types of test objects, the regular ones that are being supplied by us as a structured support of any given technology, and on the other hand, if he faces trouble, for example, to automate very, very large or compound objects which are highly customized, especially on UI automation implemented AUTs such as WPF, Telerik, DevExpress, JavaFX, you just name it. It's ever more easy. So this is an API that is being taken as it is and was embedded strictly to comply with the UFT test object regulation. For the API testing, we had the enhancements like JVM dynamic loading, Swagger support, and the test generation wizard, which enables automatically generating tests of API tests based on different testing aspects. This is a very good opportunity for people who are not acquainted with API testing to have a kickstart, something that is already being done for them as a first stage, and then they can edit it, and of course, most preferably, add more content to it and make their tests thicker and more thorough. In the mobile center pillar, we have the newly introduced Windows Phone support. We have also the OCR support. In a nutshell, try to imagine that you have anything on your own device, your own iOS-based or Android device, and it bears a text, even a text of on-off of such, I don't know, toggle button. So aside from the fact that you can actually learn those and record those and replay those events quite easily, you can also allocate where do you want to click it, but just based on a identification which is based on textual traits, like whether you find the word on somewhere on the screen, and if you have multiples of those, you can handle those by just sheer indexing, and then do whatever operation that you would like to do that on the device. Aside from those we have the emulated to real replay, which means that if you have an emulation, you can easily record it and then replay it on real device. On the core functionalities, we have integrations, and as you can see, integration is a word that comes along every now and then. The most important part here to say is that we have the enhancements of the HTML report. Not only that we made the HTML report, but we better refined it and also added it for BPT. And we have the network virtualization integration. Essentially, network virtualization virtualizes a separate set of network conditions, so that people who would like to actually test their applications under strict conditions, like in the middle of a replay, they would like that the Wi-Fi will be off too, and the connection should be switched to 3G, for example, in a way like simulating entering into an elevator. So you really don't need to do that. You can actually create this whole set of profiles that enables this network virtualization. We can deep dive a little bit into some of those that were just described. So we can start with the test generation wizard. As I mentioned, this will give you the capability to automatically generate tests for the API testing. In the right side of the screen, you can see different aspects of a test or an API test that could be tackled. When you check those checkboxes, it would actually create activities or API test activities that are ready to use and should bear a very limited maintenance as a start. We should also mention that it supports REST, SOAP, so importing of WSDL, WADL, and Swagger-based API is also supported for that. Microsoft UI automation, as mentioned before, this is actually how it looks like in this particular screen. We can see that it's just a screen of Telerik, and on the right side you can see the object SPY that bears pretty much the same identification properties that anybody who is well acquainted with UFT would simply regard as a very similar test object to the ones that we regard as regular ones. In the screen below, you can see the actual script. So you can see that the representation of the UIA has its own representation for window, tab, button, whatever, and of course with the own inherent methods and properties that UFT gives just for free. I say we move on to a demo of UI automation. So in this particular case, we will demonstrate the recording. You can see UFT on the right side and the AUT application under test on the left side of the screen. Just for the sake of demonstration, we will just check some checkboxes, and as you can see, there is a default mode who can't really identify those items. We can do the very same thing, but with the UI automation recording mode. When doing that, we might as well add something to the checkbox and text, slider, whatever. And once we stop the test, we will see that those were recorded as structured test objects. So this is a major difference that gives the capability to overcome tough situations in which identification was something so obscure that people usually tend to overcome it by workarounds who were very, very nasty. So this is not the case anymore. Here we will demonstrate the SPY. The same thing as I mentioned before. For now, we can see a regular win list view, and we can switch and toggle to the UI automation view. What we see on the screen right now is actually the representation of the hierarchy of those objects. In addition, we can also add this to the object repository and handle it in the object repository of UFT much the same way like any other test object. It has also IntelliSense, so you can have the complete, the autocomplete, and of course, once replayed, it works like a charm. So this is just the UI automation piece, and as for the network virtualization integration, I mentioned it before. This one would give you the capability to really simulate or to virtualize some kind of an environment for your own network for the test to be ran in. So if you'd like to have a complete view on the integration, you'll see that it's something which is very, very simple from perspective of usage. In this case, we will demonstrate a UFT integration. You can see UFT on the left side of the screen, and the network virtualization manager on the right side of the screen. There is a connection with the URL, username, and password. You can test the connection that indeed it is a valid one. Once it's done, you can actually use profiles. Those profiles could be used pretty much on demand. You can create new profiles on the right side of the screen with the NV Test Manager to simulate different profiles like busy network or 3G busy network, one which is good, typical, whatever, and of course to create your own custom profile. Once you have this name prepared, you might as well just start your emulation with this token and end it by stop emulation for the very same token that you just created. This is it. So the entire test that would run here is enveloped with a specific network virtualization. So this is the only part that is being technical, which is really not that technical for somebody who needs to do such things and not even get up from his seat. Okay, before we move on to BPT, I will also use here my good old buddy, MS Paint. If you remember, so we managed to articulate UFT, and we had the GUI test and the API test, and BPT, who is also another type of test, is being built upon the capabilities that the GUI test already gives. But what are those capabilities? What BPT really gives that justifies its sheer existence? So BPT is another name for design and practice. When you're creating a test, every now and then you might suffer from those problems that you have three personas writing scripts, writing assets, connect them to different repositories. The one here that was ill that day doesn't know that this one was creating this one, and he actually creates another repository to host his own test. The other one takes it from here, but up until then, the actual application under test was changed. Once it's changed, all of the people should have changed it here and here. Just a second. Let me see if I'm getting indication that the sound is lacking. Let me try and see whether it's okay right now, and we will continue. Okay, so we will continue. So, as I mentioned, BPT is all about enabling reusability. So it means that we created a framework that represents a very structured, mannered way of how to create, design, and manage your assets. That's the reason why BPT first and foremost lives in ALM. ALM is the only source of truth, if you like, that enables the handling and the allocation and even connections between different types of assets in it, which means that inside UFT you can create a BPT test that could be ran from UFT or even from ALM. And it gives a very, very strong emphasis on this structure, which means that if you create a repository, it might reside on a dedicated container called application area, so it can even be referenced to other sourced repositories to handle your permissions, such as which keywords you would like to be exposed, other scripting assets that should be also enabled and available to anybody who is using it. And anybody, this is the keyword here, because anybody could be different people who are using the same repository. They're using it to create different components. Components is a key is a key term in BPT. Each one of those components could be used and reused, and it's totally exposed in ALM, so people can actually drag and drop it to create tests out of building blocks. Those are those building blocks. Each one of those could be login, logout, purchase order, or things like this. And I didn't even start to speak about the parameterization of those. I will get to that later. But I just need you to understand that from component level, this is just a building block. And when the test is ran from ALM or even constructed, those just it could be might as well drag and dropped and create a flow of a test that represent a concrete business flow that should be tested. Each one of those could be also, as I mentioned, be reused, because this could be this one, or even to have a different role in another test for that matter. The sheer fact that users who design tests can eliminate a great deal of their exposed items that just take space out of their own hard drives or even inside ALM and are poorly managed. ALM comes to the rescue here and actually gives the capability to better track those in such a way that even if I would want to delete this one, it won't be deleted, because ALM would know that a test, some test, is still using this component and he won't allow that to happen. Think of the sheer damage that might be inflicted on people for things that they just happen to delete or even change without notice. So BPT is a framework that has been built upon the strong capabilities of the GUI test. Sorry, and it looks a little bit like a reusable component-based approach. So those are the things that we should articulate, which are on BPT. We have, as from the 1250 version, all 5 of those been enhanced, which means that first we gave emphasis on the scriptless testing for people who are well acquainted with the business processes and less with the actual scripting craft. So this gap is being bridged even more efficiently. The handling of test data, which is a problem on its own, how to control, to create different data sets that drive your tests in an efficient way, to manage importing and exporting of those assets, especially for market-leading products such as an MS Excel. Just to do things in MS Excel and to import it into your test. So you don't even need this highly technical persona to be involved. You can actually create your own data and just give it to the most technical personas, even just to be imported quite easily into your tests. As for the usability and accelerators, I managed to note also the simplified view that I will show, and the BPT packaged apps kit, which is dedicated for smart componentization of components and track automated changes, actually. For example, if you had changes that were taking place on the AUT itself, it can be done quite easily. So I think that before we move on to the demo of each one of those that I just mentioned, let's just give the 1252 specific highlighted features. Okay. So the TCG stands for Test Cases Generator. Sorry. The TCG stands for Test Case Generator. Essentially, it would give you the capability to have pairwise triplets testing to create rapidly different test cases for your test, and that could be based on different data sets. I will demonstrate it in just a few seconds. LeanFT that I mentioned earlier that bears now an integration with LeanFT. So if you have a user that created also LeanFT assets, it can be imported as BPT test components to be used in tests of BPT in ALM quite easily. It's just an importing, and those manifest themselves as components. And from that moment on, it doesn't really matter for ALM that it could be a machine that runs on the other side of the world, and it happens to be LeanFT. It runs as if it's a native BPT test. I also mentioned the reporting, and we have the lightweight HTML report also for BPT, as well as metrics and the KPI reports that gives the user a better track of usage of this framework. So let's move on to the demo. In this first part, we will show the scriptless testing. As I mentioned, there is the dedicated view that you can see right now. It's dedicated just for BPT, and it could be toggled. It's the very same view of UFT. For now, we started a recording session. This is one AUT, or application under test, and we can see that those ones that I just typed are recorded and are stored in the object repository. We can capture specific items, for example, to snag just those two buttons. Once we do that, so it's already in the object repository, as we can see on the screen. So the capturing could be during a recording or even in design time. We can take snapshots that represent those components. Remember that we have components for a BPT test as building blocks. Once I add an output value, it's been automatically parameterized. So here you can see the keyword view that gives you the operations, as well as the captured input and output parameters that were parameterized automatically with the data that I set. Speaking of data, so how exactly could we manage different pieces of data that reside in our tests? Let's say we have a test that has some iterations. Each one of those is a component. So let's take a component with 2 iterations. We can see that it has the agent name. In this one, it has just 1 parameter to be iterated. We can export it to an Excel sheet. Once it's done, it's completely out of UFT. It could be maintained. As you can see below, each one of the test components is articulated in a dedicated sheet. In this case, we can just add different pieces of data to be iterated upon. So let's say this will be 4 iterations on the search component. Once it's imported, you can see that the data is populated and it's changed to 4 iterations. We can even see those and handle it inside this pane. So it could have been done also from here, but the sheer fact that there are more than 2 ways just to do that, it's pretty much convenient, because it might as well also be something that was generated somewhere in the other side of the world and was simply shared with us. So the same test can run on different data. We should also mention the dynamic data binding. By saying dynamic data binding, we refer to pretty much the same test, but with a twist. Let's suppose that we have test configurations. Configurations in ALM represent different states of running. Those could be negative testing, positive testing, boundary testing, you name it. But the data that you actually populate into your test makes this difference. And of course, the logic of your test. Here you can see that you can map automatically the parameters that are based on the Excel files that you just saw. Each one of those could be a test configuration. Each one of those test configuration represents different data sets that are taken from the same data set, from the same file, sorry. So as you can see, there is positive, negative, and whatever, and it can even be it can even be filtered here in the selected rows. So actually people can just dictate that they want just rows 1 until 8 and row 19, and for that would serve the purpose of running their tests in a positive, negative, or whatever logic that they find. Due to time constraints, I might just go over and present the BPT packaged apps kit. So BPT packaged apps kit represents a smart recording that is taking place for now in our support for the SAP GUI client. So in this case, we can create a test that is utilized with a smart recording, and we first need to see what is this smart recording exactly. Here we can see SAP GUI. For those of you who are acquainted with it, this is a mature GUI client of SAP. Some operations could be done here. And if we take notice that I actually switch between different tabs and open another dialog, what the engine did behind the scenes is actually to fragment those into different components, because it identified that I switch between different screens. So those are the captured components. Not only that those components are being captured, I can also, before they're actually created in ALM, change those. I can even see the images that were taken. For example, the snapshot that was automatically taken for me to represent this this component. And I might as well also change from here the name of the component. By this time, those components are still not created. So at this point, I can do whatever I want. I can even check for availability of existing ones that I would like to reuse. So in this case, the system has identified that I have something which is already in existence in ALM that bears a 50% similarity, whether it's on a similar object, steps, step order, or whatever. And the user is free to decide whether he would like to reuse it based on the steps and which test is being used in it. And it's being done based on a simple click. Once I click it, it's reused. It's completely reversible, and I can state that I would like to create it from scratch if I want. Once I press the create button, it's created in ALM. This is the part where you see the test grid inside UFT. And it's created. So the running of the test, we will skip it due to time constraints. I think that the last part here would be this one. What happens if, for example, you have a test that was once created in the very same way, like the one that I showed right now, but tend to have a failure? Then you can have a change detection run mode, which is a dedicated run mode that gives the capability to track changes that actually took place in the UI. For example, if something was omitted, like a checkbox or the length of the width of an edit field, it can be tracked, which means that the report that you will get will be that the checkbox is missing. This is the minus sign, and the user can also apply those changes, as well as the objects themselves, not only to the script itself. This is the actual and the anticipated one, so you can see the change. I think we are on the brink of the end of this session, so I would like to move on, and if there are further questions, I would be more than glad to answer. Robert?
Thank you, Rohi. Thank you very much for a very detailed explanation of the feature functionality in unified functional testing. We do have quite a few questions that have been coming in during the webinar. We are actually over the top of the hour, so I just wanted to mention that for those of you that are still on the webinar, all of these questions will be posted to the Vivid website in about a week's time. They have to go to HPE and get reviewed for answers and correctness, but they will be posted. For those of you that have a few extra minutes and can stay with us, I'd like to go through some of the questions and get Rohi to answer as many as we can, time permitting. So please bear with us for the next few minutes, and we'll try to get through some of these questions. The first question would be, can you explain how to move from manual to automation and from desktop to mobile platform testing? That was our first question. Rohi?
Sure. So as was mentioned here, Sprinter is a good way to start this passage between the manual world to the automated testing world, which means that if you have manual testers and you have your manual assets, those could be preserved and be done and executed and to be captured in an automated fashion, so that the stage of developing tests is ever more easy. As for the second question of how to leverage those strong capabilities of UFT, it also refers to different platforms. For example, we showed that you can have the capability to automate between different applications, and even if during your business process all of a sudden you need to do something on a web-based application, there is no problem whatsoever. The agent of UFT can tackle it and to identify it quite easily. And this seamless integration with Mobile Center gives this supplement that you can even run this or record it if you like, a preliminary on mobile devices.
Thank you for that answer. We have another question from Judy. Her question is, we're currently using UFT 12.01 and have both UFT and functional testing licenses. When we upgrade to version 12.52, will the functional testing continue to work, or will we need to upgrade the functional testing licenses to UFT licenses?
Excellent question. So the FT license is fully equipped, and it could be used to use UFT with full valid license. Having said that, there are minimal additions that might bear a difference, but in a global scale, whatever you did before with FT testing license, you can do with UFT license. And we should note also the change of the license mechanism that brought the AutoPass licensing mechanism to the table, which also bears a clean, neat transition between the existing licenses to the newly generated ones.
Great, thank you, Rohi. That was a very precise answer, and I'm sure everybody that's on the call appreciates that update, especially from a licensing point of view. Our next question comes from Elizabeth, and she's asking, what about the same scripts running across different browser versions? We have to maintain a few previous versions of IE, Chrome, Firefox, etc.
Sorry, you were breaking up. Can you repeat that?
Yes. The question is, they have scripts that they run against IE, Chrome, Firefox, different versions of those browsers, and will the same scripts work in this version that did in the previous versions?
Certainly. We put an emphasis on backward compatibility, so everything that worked before will work now, with a strict emphasis on backward compatibility and with enhanced capabilities, which means that the cross-browser testing is ever more effective and efficient and being refined as service specs go by.
Wonderful. I'm sure that's great news to everybody. We have another question from Rakesh, and his question is, will the new HTML report be available from ALM after we run the UFT test from ALM? And if yes, which version of ALM is going to support that?
Okay, so the compatibility with ALM is aligned with the UFT 1250. To my best recollection, it should be on the 1250. Tzachi will correct me if I'm wrong, but if there are more versions prior to that, I can go back to you guys offline.
Thank you, Roy. I'm sure some of these questions will be followed up offline, and again, remember that we're not going to have time to ask and answer all the questions that have come in during the webinar, but at about a week's time from today, you should be able to go on to the Vivid site and look at all the questions and answers there. The slide has popped up that mentions additional resources, some of the URLs that you can go to, so you'll be able to take note of those. And again, the recorded session will be available in a day or two on the Vivid website. So you'll have to log into the Vivid website to see this presentation, this recording in its entirety. I think we have time for about one or two more questions. I know we've run over, and we appreciate those of you that have stayed with us. The next question has to do with business process testing. And the question is, how is business process testing really any different than just using actions and coordinating the team efforts, except for the fact that you have to pay for the add-in of BPT?
Excellent question. Excellent question. So, indeed, you can technically implement it by using external actions. That's correct. But if you have those building blocks, you have those buried in your tests. So, meaning that if I have a login action somewhere in a test called ROI, if somebody needs to use it, he simply wouldn't know that. Because in ALM, what is exposed is the test itself, not his comprising elements of actions. On the contrary, BPT will allow those building blocks to be exposed first and foremost in ALM, so that people can know and actually open those separately and use them. So this is just one sheer difference. Scalability is also a word that is that should be put on the table, because when you're talking about something that should be dealt with ALM, to be fully managed by ALM, and to leverage the scalability of the tests that should be run in ALM, so BPT would be your preferred choice. So this is just 2. 3, we've added many cool things to BPT. So if someone has his own insights also on the price itself, which is not my domain, he should see also the goodies that BPT brings along that even GUI test still hasn't absorbed. So the cutting edge that we now allow ourselves, like test case generator that I didn't manage to present here due to time constraints, and the creation of test cases based on pairwise testing and so forth. Those are all things that really simplify work and make it a lot faster. This is BPT turf. And I'm not biased because I'm the functional architect of BPT.
Yes, we understand, Rui. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I believe we've run out of time today for this webinar. We want to thank the Vivid organization for bringing us this webinar in conjunction with HPE. We want to sincerely thank Roe for his time today in presenting this topic and answering as many of these questions as we can. Again, remember, all the questions that can be answered will be posted on the Vivid website about a week from today once they've been reviewed and answered as completely as possible. We want to remind you that you can look at some of these additional resources. There's a link for a trial of UFT. There's also the social networking that you can join into, and there's a lot of YouTube presentations that you can look online and get some other insights into some of this functionality and features that are coming in the products. We want to remind you all that you have to be a member of Vivid to access the online recording and the question and answers. So please visit and join the Vivid organization if you aren't already a member. Next slide.
Okay.
I thought there was one more slide. I guess not. I just want to also ask you all to keep in mind that the Discover event is coming up in Las Vegas later this summer. And for those of you that are a Vivid member, you can get a discount by using the Vivid code that you can find on the Vivid website, and it saves you some additional money on registering for the Discover event in Las Vegas. I look forward to seeing many of you there if you can attend, and I look forward to working with you and speaking to many of you again in the future on similar webinars that are brought to you by the Vivid and the HPE organization. Again, we thank you all for your time and for joining us today, and I wish you all a great day and have a wonderful week. Thank you, Roe. Thank you, Terry.
Tari. Thank you very much, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.